Afternoon and welcome to the Daily Item and our conversation with Marc Freidenberg, who is the Democratic candidate for the 12th District in the special election for retired Congressman Tom Marino's seat. Welcome, Marc. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to go kind of round the table asking a bunch of questions, and we'll ask the same questions of your opponent, Republican Fred Keller, when he comes in on Monday. And we'll kick it off right away, starting to talk about health care. I don't think there's a topic you're probably hearing any more about than health care, and I know it's the one that is of particular interest to our readers and our audience. So, setting aside the imperfection of the current system, we all know it's not perfect. We all know the Affordable Care Act could use some help. What specific changes should be made to give Americans better health care than they have right now?
Yeah, and it is one of the top questions that I get asked. And I support universal health care for every American. And
does that mean like Medicare for all, that plan?
That's one way to get there. And so I think that every American deserves access to affordable health care. Okay. And the Affordable Care Act, as you say, got us in the right direction, albeit imperfectly. But there was a lot about it that was really, really good. For people who have insurance through their employers, it provided a set of essential services. For people like my mother, who have had breast cancer twice and a double mastectomy, she would be uninsurable today if not for the protections for people with pre-existing conditions because of the Affordable Care Act. But there is room to improve. And one of the ways to do that, and I think to be fiscally responsible, is to look at the ways that we can reduce cost in the system, because that's really what is so unique about the American healthcare system, is the cost per patient compared to the rest of the world. And I think a lot of that is from profit from the for-profit insurance companies. We're paying a middleman on every transaction. And I think having a single-payer system would be the most cost-effective way to bring costs down. That's the fiscally responsible thing. But at the same time, I'm pragmatic. And so if there is a way to move in the direction of getting to universal health care, and that might include things like an option to allow people to buy into Medicare, if there's Republicans are willing to work with me on that in a bipartisan way, that's something I would support, because I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Do the Democrats right now have a specific plan to move the Affordable Care Act forward?
You know, I think I've seen some presentations that have been done, but I'm speaking for myself and,
Sure.
and what I hear coming from voters in the district. One of the top things is about the cost of prescription drugs and out-of-pocket costs. And frankly, I think it's absurd that in 2019 Medicare still is not able to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies. That's something that President Trump campaigned on in 2016. How is that not done yet? I think that's one of the first things that we need to be able to tackle. And then also in the United States, we have this relationship for most people between their employment status and their healthcare status. And that is pretty inefficient, and then that leads to a lot of missed opportunity, because it keeps people from starting up their own small businesses in the 12th District. Mm-hmm. It keeps small businesses from being able to recruit employees away from big businesses that are able to provide health care for their employees. I think if we are able to divide that relationship up and make sure that people can get health care however they would like, that's really going to stimulate our economy.
Okay. It does come up every once in a while about being able to buy health insurance across state lines. Is that something you...
I haven't. I've heard that idea, and more competition is generally better. But I'm not sure that that's what's really the cost driver. I'm not sure that that's going to be the end-all, be-all solution that we need. Healthcare is expensive, and there's no two ways around that. But I think we can bring down what's sort of the uniquely high cost in America by looking at some, I would consider, common sense ways to reduce inefficiencies.
I think this is probably a very easy question for you to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Would you vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act and end its protection for those with pre-existing conditions if a plan to replace it was not in place?
No, certainly not. And we saw that play out in the summer of 2017. And the Affordable Care Act, it's been unpopular at times, but Americans rose up almost universally to defend the Affordable Care Act during that time. And it's a good thing, because it has done a lot of good for a lot of people in this district. And that's not even to talk about the Medicaid expansion, which is really the nursing home payment program for most Pennsylvanians. My opponent pushed hard to make sure that Pennsylvania did not include Medicaid expansion as part of the Affordable Care Act, and I think that that's a very dangerous move.
Do me a favor. Just explain to me single-payer system, because I think that's a phrase that gets used a lot, but I'm not sure everybody understands it.
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So what single payer means is not that the government is the healthcare provider. These are not government doctors. It's that there is a single payer, which could be the Medicare system. I mean, we have the Medicare system, we have the VA system. Those are different models for different kinds of patients. The Medicare system, but through private providers, is the single payer. And you have a choice of doctors that you would like to go to. And along with that, by the way, what people do today a lot is they'll purchase supplemental insurance for their Medicare. And I suspect that people will continue to want to do that, and I would certainly support people continuing to be able to purchase supplemental insurance if they choose to, on top of that basic goal of universal access that we need to get to.
The Medicare for All idea, as someone who knows people, parents, et cetera, who have gone through filing for Medicare, it's a pretty damn complicated process. I'm not sure we want to wish Medicare for all on everybody.
Well, it's true that there's a lot of paperwork, and I'm still, coming down from the sweats from April 15th myself. Paperwork can be hard, but it's a system that works, and it is much more cost effective because of, again, that lack of administrative overhead and frankly, that lack of profit motive. I don't want private companies to be deciding what kind of care you get. I'd rather that doctors make that decision.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you about healthcare, and I'm going to move on to now Managing Editor Bill Bowman, who's going to ask some questions about immigration.
Immigration, sort of a clean pivot from healthcare to immigration. So much of the focus over the last 2 years has been building barriers or building walls across the southern border. How big a part of the solution to our immigration issues is a barrier or a wall, and what are some of the solutions you suggest to sort of slow down this flow?
Sure. For a lot of the topics that I think we may talk about today, I'm driven by, what does the data show us? What do the experts tell us? And we can't all be experts in every topic, but we can go to find reliable sources to try to find some answers. And what I've seen from the experts is that in some parts of the southern border, including areas where we already have it, a fence or a barrier wall may make sense. In other places, increased personnel, more jobs, having that kind of boots on the ground could make sense. In other places, technological measures, cameras and sensors of different kinds could make sense. I think maybe even more fundamentally, we have an asylum crisis right now. And what I mean by that is the number of people who are seeking asylum, which is lawful, but these are claims that require judgment to determine whether or not they're valid claims. And we have a huge backlog of those asylum claims right now. Their cases are not being heard for years, and that's why you see so much discussion about detention centers and separating families and all of that very kind of divisive conversation right now. I think if we had more judges to be able to handle those asylum claims, I think reducing that backlog, that will really help. And if we see that there are a lot of people coming here with claims that aren't valid, that's interesting data that we can use to make some decisions about immigration policy, but there's just no reason to believe that that's the case right now.
Your thoughts on the president's tweet about sending illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities?
It seems like it would be a pretty cost-ineffective measure to move folks across the country in most cases, so that's not something that I would support.
Of the estimated 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants, about half are people who came, and you talked about the asylum, about half came, on legitimate visas and have overstayed their cards and things like that. Is that another system that you see needs some addressing as well?
I think so. You're talking about folks who have overstayed the visas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's systems that we could put in place and check back in with people. And the fact of the matter is that they're almost always contributing to the economy, and are really they're a resource for the United States. But of course, we want everybody to follow the law. So I think that's an important step. But I think we can also take a look at, particularly for the DACA recipients who were basically promised that if they filled out the paperwork, went through the right steps, that they would be taken care of. I think we've turned our back on them. And when America breaks its deals, I think we lose our moral standing around the world, and I think that makes us lose credibility. That makes it harder for us to have relations with the world economically, diplomatically, militarily when we need them. It makes it a lot harder for us if our word is not our bond.
So what is the answer for the Dreamers?
I support a pathway to citizenship for them. I mean, these are folks who came here, I'll say no fault of their own. It was no choice of their own to come here. And if they're here, if they're working or if they're in school and they're following the rules and not breaking the law, I think we should have a pathway to citizenship for them so that they'll be contributing to the tax rolls like everybody else, if nothing else.
Okay.
Just to follow on that, in terms of a path to citizenship, where do they fall in line with, you're talking asylum seekers, you're talking those who have overstayed visas, now you're talking about the dreamers. I mean, how does that line form?
I'm not really sure if there is a line that we need. I mean, this is a country that can walk and chew gum, but there is, the people that are in America, I guess if I had to pick, I suppose that those would be the top priority. But I think we can do all of these things.
We'll shift over to publisher Fred Scheller now to talk about the budget and the deficit.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, the federal budget deficit is about $900 billion for 2019, and will exceed $1 trillion each year beginning in 2022. Is that a matter of concern for you and the American people?
That's absolutely a matter of concern. These are debts that we're going to be leaving behind for our kids and for our grandkids, and it's going to make it harder for us to pay our bills. I mean, a lot of them are going to owe to China. We're going to be left holding the bag. I think we need to, instead of giving away, $1 trillion tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires that don't live in this district and to massive corporations that aren't paying income tax, I think we need to instead, have a tax system that's more fair, tax cuts that are permanent for working class Americans. That'll help to bring down the budget and the budget deficit and really stimulate the economy.
Do you have any ideas for specific cuts? Any considerations, for instance, should Social Security age be increased? Should Medicare benefits be changed?
We should not be raising the Social Security age. I can tell you that much. That's a promise that we've made to people who have paid into the system for their entire working lives, and there's no need to raise the age. I think what we need to do, and the cuts that I would propose, would be to undo those cuts, again, for millionaires, billionaires, and the wealthiest corporations. When that tax cut was rushed through in December of 2017, there were permanent cuts for the wealthiest and temporary cuts for everybody else. I mean, if anything, I would flip that. I think we need permanent cuts for working Americans. That's a way to reduce that deficit. And no, I don't support cuts for Medicare either for the same reason. I mean, these are programs that working Americans, Medicare is one of them that working Americans have paid into for their entire careers, and they deserve what they were promised.
So you don't think tax reform will eventually stimulate the economy enough to start decreasing the deficit?
No, and in fact, I think we saw that there was sort of a sugar high throughout last year, and obviously, I mean, I hope that continues. But the history shows that when we put more money into working Americans' pockets, they spend it, and that helps to stimulate the economy. This trickle-down idea, leaving more money in the hands of wealthy Americans and in corporations that typically will not use it to build new factories or to hire new people, but rather to issue dividends and stock buybacks, that does not stimulate the economy.
Let's clarify, what do you mean by the sugar high?
The sugar high is having sort of a temporary cuts, trying to goose the numbers. There was sort of a little bump in 2018, and for some people that had a meaningful impact in their lives, but on a national level, a bump in 2018. But we're already seeing nationally and globally, people are worried about the economy slowing down throughout 2019. If the tax cuts, I think, had their intended effect, we wouldn't see that declining already.
I'll switch over to Rick Dandies.
Okay, Mark. I want to ask you a little bit about the Mueller report, which obviously you have not seen yet. Do you think that Americans should get to see the full unredacted report?
I don't think that Americans should be able to see the full unredacted report because there are a number of categories of information that they're unable to see, even if Attorney General Barr had requested court authorization to release parts of it. Information that might reveal sources and methods and other intelligence information shouldn't be released to the public, no. But they should to Congress.
Why?
So Congress can perform its oversight function and making sure that the law enforcement and intelligence communities are following the rules. I have every reason to believe that they are, but there's a reason that we have
Can you
oversight.
imagine a scenario where it gets released to Congress and it doesn't eventually get out to everybody else?
Absolutely. I mean, maybe not all of it, but at least to the Gang of Eight, we rely upon people being able to keep secrets to keep us safe at the national security level.
Okay.
Do you feel that Attorney General Barr's 4-page summary told enough of the story?
It's impossible to say until we see the report.
There's been enough released on this. Do you believe that Russian meddling affected the 2016 election? And if so, what are some suggestions about what to do so that it doesn't happen again?
There's absolutely no evidence that Russian meddling affected the voter rolls or anybody's votes or reporting of election results from precincts or anything of that nature.
In that sense, yeah.
That's right. However, there's crystal clear evidence that Russians and other countries in 2016, 2018, and it appears attempting for future elections to spread disinformation and misinformation on the internet using platforms, typically American-owned platforms. And I think that we have an obligation. We need to make sure that Facebook, Google, and through their subsidiary YouTube are held responsible if, especially a foreign nation, is intentionally spreading misinformation on the internet. That's information that is disruptive to productive discourse, and it's lies, and it's trying to divide us.
I'll switch over to state politics just a minute. Governor Wolf mandated that Pennsylvania voting machines should have a paper trail. Should the federal government help offset this cost, which will be significant to small counties, and particularly in your district?
Absolutely. Yes, I believe that the federal government can and should help the state and really at the county level to pay for those new voting machines. And this is a mandate that it came from Governor Wolf, but it's in response really to federal guidelines. And this is all in response to really what happened in 2000. There's a long history to this. And the voting machines are an important step forward. Having that voter verifiable paper trail is a critical step, but it's expensive. And, I was at a statewide county commissioners meeting recently, and you hear folks from, say, Perry County talk about how much they're going to have to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars for these new machines. They didn't ask to get them, right? It's an order from Governor Wolf. They're important, but I think because it's important, the federal government, if it's their mandate, should pay for it as well.
I want to follow up on that one a little bit. We have two counties in here, Montour and Snyder County, that already have paper backups, and they're being mandated to upgrade as well. I mean, should they be included in this, or if someone comes in from the state to review that? Because these are counties that are small, don't have a ton of walking around money, and here they're being hit with $250,000, $500,000 increases when they already have the paper backup that's part of the mandate.
Are they, and I don't actually know the answer to this, are they paper backups that are voter verifiable that you can see directly, I voted for person A or for person B?
Yeah, I vote in Montour County. I color it in and it slides into the machine, and they have the ballot then later. So
if it is already meeting all of the requirements, then I don't see the sense in getting new machines. I'd have to look at exactly how often the devil's in the details on these.
All right. Well, we have a myriad of other questions that we want to ask you today, Mark, and again, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. There's been an issue from the beginning of the 2016 campaign about the release of tax returns. And President Trump has repeatedly said that he would happily release his returns, but sorry, I can't because I'm under audit. There's great debate over whether that's true or not. But, well, we know he is under audit, I'm sure. There's no question about that. But are there any circumstances in which you think a presidential candidate should not release their tax returns?
I mean, I suppose that's up to each presidential candidate, and we get to decide with our vote whether they've made the right decision or not. Anybody is free, as far as I'm aware. There's no law that says if you're under audit, you can't release it. I can't think of any other rule that would outright prohibit it. It's a choice that candidate gets to make.
Do you think candidates should release their tax?
I do. I mean, we want to get a sense of first, how fiscally responsible the person is. We want to get a sense of, are they paying their fair share in taxes? Have they been? What is their charitable giving? What kinds of deductions are they taking or not? How much do they owe who? And, could that have any influence over anybody? I think there's a good reason that it's been practiced since President Nixon to release returns, and that most 2020 candidates are releasing their returns in 2019.
Do you think it ought to be required?
I don't think it should be required in the only way that I could think of to require it would be with nationally would be with a constitutional amendment. A state could pass their own law if they wanted to. I wouldn't support that as a constitutional amendment. I think there are important privacy and First Amendment considerations there, but I hope that voters would take that decision pretty seriously when evaluating candidates.
Okay. Bill?
If elected, you go to Washington, where there has been this gridlock for going on 10 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. I mean, do you think there's anything down there that the two parties can work together on and move forward on? And if so, what are those things?
Yeah, I think there are a number of areas where the parties can work together, and the first one is infrastructure spending. And I think there was a really golden opportunity at the start of this administration for, though Republicans controlled all three branches of government, to, on a bipartisan basis, really focus on infrastructure. And that's not the path that Congress chose. But I think that's always still a priority. And in this district, infrastructure, there are so many needs. I mean, the Daily Item's just on this piece, this series about rural broadband. That is, I think, one of the top priorities, the things that I hear about from voters, and the federal government can play a role there in doing a couple of things. One of them is making sure that we have fiber optic cable run to every home and business. There was the business that had fiber optic cable 200 feet away on the pole, but couldn't get it delivered even just down the pole, as I understand it. And that is, frankly, that's absurd. And that's a business now that's not going to be able to compete with larger ones, in other counties or in other parts of the state. And you hear that for education and the impact that that's having on students and leaving them not prepared for college, or them just not getting the same quality of education because of lack of internet that students in other school districts get. On healthcare, of course, this is a really rural area, not a lot of providers close by for folks who live in some parts of it. I think telemedicine could be very promising, but it's not possible at the broadband capabilities that many people have. And then I think we need to use our antitrust laws as well to make sure that we are guaranteeing competition when we do have a wire running to somebody's house, in the same way that you have choice for your electricity provider, even though it's one wire, practically speaking. We should have competition as well, so it's not just company X, you'll pay what we charge and you'll like it, that we can have competition, because we're falling behind the rest of the world on price and on speed. We're paying more for less, and I think competition would really help there. So that type of infrastructure is critical, and I think there's bipartisan support for that. Repairing our roads and our bridges, repairing things like the Williamsport levee that needs to be recertified, that needs at least a couple $1 million, really. They've been trying to get state grants to be able to fill it, but I think the federal government can help out there, because it's a levee that was built by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that these if the FEMA requirements are not met, businesses are going to have to purchase flood insurance. It's going to be pretty unaffordable. A lot of them are going to leave the district. So infrastructure, I think, is one area where I would expect that there could be broad bipartisan support, and that's not going to change because the infrastructure is not fixing itself. It continues to get worse. A lot of ratings of Pennsylvania's civil infrastructure, D or F, and it doesn't magically get better. It's going to take some investment. It's going to take the parties working together. So I think that's one. Another, again, is this Medicare prescription drug prices. That is, it seems so common sense. It really puzzles me why we haven't pushed that through yet. And then I think protecting Social Security is another one. I mean, this is, again, a program that people have paid into. This is a promise that we've made to each other, that to the next generation, to when we're older, that we're going to have the ability to retire and some dignity and quality of life. And I see the administration propose pretty savage cuts. I see my opponent, Fred Keller, being supported by the Club for Growth, a group which has the goal of destroying Social Security as we know it. And my opponent, Fred Keller, supporting the president's budget with its cuts to Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. These are bipartisan programs with broad bipartisan support that have done a heck of a lot of good for people in this district and that we have to protect.
Let me follow up on that real quick. You mentioned earlier that you didn't agree with the idea of increasing the Social Security age level. You mentioned that because we had made a promise to people, but life expectancy has extended, and maybe a law that was passed many years ago might need a revisit. You don't think that's something that's worth looking at?
Yeah, I see the logic in what you're saying, and actually the grim fact is that life expectancy for a lot of people in this district has gone down a little bit in the last couple of years because of depression and health issues. But I think one way that we can guarantee the solvency of the program is lifting the payroll tax for Social Security income. I think that's a common sense measure. It gets bumped a little bit year to year, but I think if we're really interested in having a tax system that's fair, that really delivers for the people of this district, lifting the cap on payroll tax would be a great way to do it.
Okay. Fred?
Kind of a follow-up on that, too. Do you think we're too polarized to work across the aisles? That is a frustrating thing for many of our readers, that Congress is not working together. And some believe that any such gesture is a sign of weakness.
I know that frustration very well, and frankly, that's part of the reason that I'm running. We've really lost control, I think, as people of having our government work for us, having our government really represent us. It's not a sign of weakness to negotiate with somebody. You never compromise on your values. You never compromise on the core of who you are. But being able to negotiate is a skill. It's the mature thing to do. It's a responsibility that you would have as an elected official to be able to do that, to be able to deliver for people. And America, we're at our best when we face big challenges. And we're facing a lot of big challenges right now. And I'm very worried about America's standing in the world, the moral leadership that we've had, the economic leadership that we've had, and diplomatic leadership that we've had. Do we even have the ability to talk to each other, to listen to each other anymore? The answer is yes, we can overcome them. We've been divided before. I mean, this is a country that's had a civil war. We've been through worse times, and we've come out the other side stronger. But it's going to take being able to sit down and talk to other people and listen to them, to do it without name calling, and to assume that other people are acting in good faith. I think that's one of the most important things, to assume that when you're talking to somebody and they tell you their beliefs, they really believe them, and they have a good reason for it. They don't think they're the bad guy. They don't think you're the bad guy. You just have different viewpoints. But if you can at least acknowledge that there's a problem that we need to solve, that there's different ways to get there, that's a productive step forward. That's going to take listening to people, being willing to negotiate, being willing to say, in some cases, I was wrong about that. I listened to an expert. I learned more information. That opened my mind to another avenue or showed that I was wrong about something. That's okay. That's how we that's how we get better. That's how we make progress as a country. I think that's what people are expecting.
Rick?
I'm going to follow up just for a second on that. Speaker Pelosi does seem to be reaching out a little bit to President Trump in terms of infrastructure. I think there are those in the Democratic Party who do believe that any kind of agreement or working with Trump is a way to prop up his re-election. So there's a lot of infighting in the parties. So you feel like infrastructure is some way that you can work across the aisle. It's not a point of weakness. You're not helping out.
No, I think that's a pretty silly viewpoint. You wouldn't be able to pass anything for 4 years if you weren't willing to work with the other side. Mm-hmm. So no, I certainly don't agree with that.
Okay. So I'll jump to something else quickly then.
Okay.
Talking about gerrymandering, do you support reform for the way congressional districts are mapped?
I do. These lines were redrawn pretty abruptly in February of last year, and I think for the better. But I don't like the method of how we got there. We kicked it over to the courts, and really the courts interpreted the Pennsylvania Constitution in a way that's fair, that ensured compact, contiguous communities of interest in one congressional district. And that's good, but we're going to do this in 2021 and every 10 years after that. And it should be the legislator, elected. Well, we elect judges too, but it should be our representatives who are making those decisions. And so I think having an independent commission, like we're looking at Governor Wolf is looking at the state level to draw state House and state Senate lines makes a lot of sense. Especially, there's a real possibility that we're going to lose a congressional district in Pennsylvania next year if the 2021 if our population continues to decline. I think we need to make sure that those lines are drawn fairly. And it's tough. I can say that when we have districts that are as big as the 12th is or the 15th, much bigger than other districts, it's the way it's got to be though to make sure that those populations are equal or very close to equal across the districts.
I believe Dennis has an answer.
Yeah, we obviously very recently saw the city of Pittsburgh pass some gun control laws that will be obviously summarily challenged, quickly challenged. But it was them stepping up, I thought, when both the state and the federal government didn't seem to be stepping up. So I have a two-part question: is there a role for a local city to make their own rules if the government in the state and the federal level is not doing what needs to be done? And B, do we have enough gun laws already, or are there ones that we still need to do nationwide?
I think that there is a role for local government on a lot of issues, because you're right that Harrisburg and Washington, the insiders there, are just not getting things done. And in a lot of communities around the 12th district and outside, like Pittsburgh, like you mentioned, local government tends to be a little bit more effective because people, although they have party affiliations, it doesn't define them as much as it may in Harrisburg or in Washington, and that opens up the possibility for negotiation more. And so I think that when Congress fails or when Harrisburg fails, that's who you turn to, the local level or the county level. And I think we're seeing that now in Pennsylvania. Laws have been proposed or are being adopted to do a few things, I think, that are common sense gun safety measures that we can.
Red flag bills, for example.
Exactly right. Yeah, consistent with the Second Amendment. And one of the issues that I'm most concerned about is that most gun deaths are not in mass shootings, though unfortunately we've had a number of them, and we're coming up on an important anniversary of a major one, but that are the vast majority of gun-related deaths are by suicide. And many of the people who commit suicide using a firearm have shown some signs of mental health issues. I think we need to empower law enforcement to use the courts to say that if somebody presents a risk to themselves or others, an extreme risk protection order, to keep them from hurting themselves using a firearm. I think that's a really important measure that we can do while still respecting gun rights.
So the argument that some people make is we've got enough gun laws, we just need to enforce the ones we have.
This is, I understand that argument, but this is a law that we don't have. And this is a law that would solve the biggest problem that we have with guns. And it's, people go through mental health issues temporarily and then can recover, many of them. This is a way to help them during that time when they need some help.
Okay, Bill?
Simple question. Your stance on climate issues.
It's
not a question, I guess it's a statement.
You would think that it's simple. To me, that it is. The science is crystal clear. Not only is the climate changing, but it's changing because of human activity and the way that we're altering our atmosphere. And the science is equally clear that we face the possibility of runaway, irreversible effects in around 12 years if we don't take meaningful changes now. I would think that that's easy to understand. I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand that or find it convenient to pretend that they don't. But I think the responsible thing to do is when we have problems to address them head on. And the great thing about this climate change problem, or the silver lining maybe I should say, is that in addressing it, we can also have new jobs and grow our economy. In Pennsylvania, we've been leaders in the last 3 energy revolutions in coal and oil and natural gas, and we're very well positioned to be the leaders in the 4th in renewable energy. And that means, we've got the universities to do the basic research that we need to do to develop those new technologies. We have a skilled workforce to do the manufacturing, to do the installation, and to do the maintenance. And you don't even have to take my word for it. Already in Pennsylvania, we have more solar installers working than we do coal miners. And those trends are only going to continue. And so the question is, are we going to stick our heads in the sand, or are we going to open up the sail and say, hey, this is where the wind is blowing. Let's solve the problem and get new jobs and grow our economy while we're doing it. I think the answer is clear.
It looks like, I'm going to follow up on that just because obviously everybody talks about the Green New Deal. Got brought up at your forum at the Chamber of Commerce last week. to some degree, do you feel maybe the Democrats have done a poor job in explaining what it really is and selling it? Because it seems like it gave the Republican Party a real easy sledgehammer to use.
Yeah, no, I'm more interested in can I explain it to the voters? And so maybe I can use this chance to do it, which is the Green New Deal is a combination. And this is, to Bill's question. We have the challenge of climate change. And I can tell you, students in my class, high school students, the younger generation, they get it because they know they're going to be left holding the bag. And we have this challenge. Do we acknowledge it or not? And I think that's the first question that I would ask anybody who's running for office. Do you acknowledge the role of man-made climate change? But then the second part is, just as the New Deal for an earlier generation revitalized the economy, helped to use public resources and public-private partnerships to help private enterprises grow, tackle the big problems that America faced in that time, and set us towards creating a comfortable middle class that worked for quite a long time, and I think it can work again. That same idea is what the Green New Deal is all about, confronting the reality and fixing it by moving to renewable energy sources and creating new jobs.
Okay, Fred?
How would you rate the president's job so far, and specifically, is there anything you believe he has done well?
I think the part of the president's job performance that I'm least satisfied with is that I don't think he's tried to be a unifier, bringing people together. I think a lot of whatever policy disagreements anybody might have with him, I think the role as president is to be a moral leader and is to bring the country together because it's the only national elected official. And I don't see a lot of evidence that he's tried to do that. I see a lot of divisive rhetoric. And I know that is an electoral strategy that may work for him and that may work for other people. But as an American, as somebody who's raising my two little daughters here, 5 and 3, it's troubling to have to explain to them why is the president saying that. So that's the part that I think is most disappointing. The economy under President Trump has continued the growth that we saw since the bottoming out from the financial crisis. My legal career involved bringing cases against the big Wall Street banks that contributed to that by knowingly lying about the value of investments that they were selling to people's retirement funds and to their life savings. That was obviously the low point for the economy recently, and we've been on a steady upward climb since then. So I think that's been effective. Tax cuts are a good thing. I'd like to see those tax cuts for working Americans be made permanent. I think that's an area for, again, bipartisan support.
Rick?
Okay. So here we are, and you're looking to go to Washington, given all the animosity that exists there between parties. Kind of a final question: why the heck would you want to be a U.S. congressman?
It's a good question, and the answer is that I think we have an obligation to leave the world in a better place than we found it, to leave a better world behind for our kids than the one we inherited from our parents. And I think for the first generation in a while, I'm worried about my generation not leaving a better generation behind for my kids. That we're going to have a population that's not willing to talk to each other, right? That we're going to have air that's unbreathable, and maybe they're going to have to work until they're 80 before they can get Social Security. We need to leave behind a better world, and so I have a history as a fighter in my legal career, advocating, as a healthcare activist and an advocate of fighting for working people, trying to say, hey, there's a problem here. We can't stick our heads in the sand about it. Any ordinary American can step forward and to play a role. Anybody could run for Congress. I don't suggest that everybody do it, but anybody can do it. And I'm trying to set an example of how to be a good citizen, how to be a model of somebody who sees a problem, takes action, is willing to call a spade, and to call out corruption and greed and lack of empathy where you see it.
All right. Well, Marc Freidenberg, candidate for the 12th Congressional District, we thank you for your time and your good answers to our questions. Thanks to everybody who watched today. We have this tape this recording will be on our website right up into and including the May 21st primary, and we'll be speaking with Representative Fred Keller, who is the Republican candidate for the 12th District, on Monday. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll be continuing to full coverage of all our political races leading up to that May 21st primary. Thank you.